I really don't like to put numbers to things because I find that a lot of people make travel a bit of a competition, right? And I'd be in a meeting at work, and there'd be people in the meeting that maybe couldn't afford a house, right? Maybe they're renting a place, right? They're starting in their career. They can't afford a house, right? They're renting. They're maybe have a family, and you get in there with an executive director or somebody, and they're talking about, oh yeah, I went to this fancy place, right? Um, and then somebody else would say, oh yeah, I went there too, and then I also went to like Argentina or something. And then somebody would say, oh yeah, well I've been to, and it's just, and even in like getting to know people conversations, it turns into that, right? Yeah. So I mean, I don't know. Definitely fortunate to have been to a lot of different places. Um, I will say the only place that I haven't been, um, continent, would probably be Africa. I was actually in Hawaii when 9/11 happened. And I do remember passing through airport security. I remember seeing stuff on the screen. I know it was a very, an event that affected a couple of countries, but it really had a global effect, right? Especially on travel.
Can you give us a thorough overview of some of the other places that you've visited over the years?
Yeah, a couple of highlights. I wish I could talk about Canada because a lot of people talk about it, but honestly, it is so expensive to travel. The population is so small. And the challenges of wildfires and weather have made it really not a great place to travel. Um, a lot of people, I know it's fashionable to hate and to diss the Americans in the United States now, but honestly, some of our greatest trips have been to the United States. I've already mentioned St. Louis, which is an amazing place. A lot of people don't know it. It hosted the World Fair at one time. It's crazy that with poverty and challenges and all the issues in the States, it's gone from a population of 2 million down to, I think, under 500,000. So it's a massive city that has just shrunk in size. They have an amazing zoo. They have the City Museum. The food is just out of this world. The barbecue, like the best barbecue ever. Very affordable. The American South generally, right? Like New Orleans, I mean, it's talked about a lot. Haven't visited it during Mardi Gras, but again, the food is absolutely amazing. The people are just outstanding. I went there, took my parents there, and being able to go to some of the restaurants there with my dad was just, it's who you're with, right? And the people really, really make it. Obviously, I'd be remiss not to mention the Philippines. I mean, I haven't been back a lot since we've been married. It's a long way to go, but I did travel there quite a bit.
What took you there the first time?
So actually, it's funny that ties into Pakistan. I was kind of traumatized by my experience there, and I had somebody a fellow that I knew back in Canada that had been there before, and he said, if you get a chance, you should go. So having this ticket to kind of allow me to go anywhere, I ended up going there, and I ended up meeting my wife there and going back there several times before our son was born. Because I was like this idea of a tropical paradise after Karachi and Pakistan. It was really just a whim. But it's definitely an amazing place. And the interesting thing about the Philippines is that it's definitely, since I've been there, it's definitely becoming more of a popular tourist destination. It's crazy to go back to Canada and have friends that have said, oh yeah, I've been to the Philippines, or, I'm planning on going, right? Whereas a long time ago, it really wasn't a huge destination.
Mm-hmm. And how do you come up with your destinations? Are you particularly interested in off the beaten path locations?
Yeah, definitely. There's less, I think it's great. I mean, I can't help but feel that a lot of these popular destinations go to, and especially now with influencers and social media, and people are just on the extreme, right? Places are either horrible or they're the best place I've ever been. And there's a huge space in the middle, right? So I can't help but feel, usually when I've been to those places that people talk about or that have historically been great destinations, they've ended up being a disappointment.
When you talked about your first trip, you said you weren't there. So how do you make sure that you live in the moment now? I've had another guy on the podcast
Yeah.
who said something that I found quite interesting. He said, when you go to a place and you are more concerned with what you're going to do next and you spend most of your time on your phone, you're not living the moment. You're just there, you're just taking pics that other people have taken and that you've
Exactly.
probably seen on
Exactly.
social media, but
Exactly.
you're not there. You don't ask
Exactly.
for directions, using the language, trying to learn stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's so destructive, right? I mean, when everybody descends on, a particular church or a particular site, it's really, really not great, right? And I can't see it as being a great experience for anybody. So, I like to take a walk. I like to use, we like to use transit. Like as soon as you arrive, just get out, find a bar or a restaurant or something. Again, becoming more extroverted as I get older. Again, engaging with people, right? A lot of people are generally very good.
Mm-hmm.
Canada has become a very conservative place, and I find it very odd. I've noticed it in my last couple of trips is that Canadians used to be outgoing, used to be known for being abroad, but now it's almost like we're in this little cocoon and we're uncomfortable engaging with people, engaging with strangers. But it is really, really, really great. Obviously, my wife being a Filipina or a Filipino, there's Filipinos everywhere in the world. And, just because I'm Canadian, I don't need to talk to Canadians. Just because she's Filipino doesn't mean that she needs to talk to Filipinos, but it still is a common thing almost everywhere in the world, which is really cool. But, yeah, going to the bars, striking up that conversation. My wife and I took a trip to Boston after we were married on the East Coast. It was a great trip. It was actually in the early days of Airbnb, so it's crazy to think. I mean, I'm not a fan of Airbnb anymore, but
Why?
it's crazy. Can talk about that, but it has definitely made things challenging for everybody. But it's crazy to think that when we were there, we stayed in an Airbnb that was actually affordable, that was actually more affordable than a hotel. It was in South Boston, which I understand is not the safest neighborhood. A lot of immigrants from Cape Verde, which we learned afterwards. And so we were actually staying in the home of a lady, like literally staying in a room of her house, right? And she was originally from Cape Verde herself and her daughter. And yeah, we went out and went to a bar there. And it was interesting. Like it was, being very white. It was a predominantly black neighborhood. And not only black, but the immigrants were mostly from Africa and from Cape Verde. So I'm sure we got some attention. This bar was definitely a dive. They didn't have a lot of food, but they had a lot to drink. And this fellow sat next to us, and we didn't know what to do. We didn't know what to eat, but he opened a conversation with us. We got to chatting. And you form impressions about people based on where they are and how they dress. But it turned out that he was actually probably quite a successful criminal defense lawyer in the area. And he offered to take us out on his boat someday. He told us what to see in the area. He told us things to watch out for and things to do. And, then he left. And as we left, we found out that he'd paid our bill at the bar, right? And it wasn't a huge bill, right? But it was an experience that definitely stays with us, and I think encouraged us afterwards just to, not judge people on what they look like or where they are, and to try to be open to things, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
And how often do you travel a year?
Oh, gosh. Like everybody, trying to make it a lifestyle in a way.
Yeah.
But, we definitely tried to travel probably once or twice or thrice a year, even if it was just to the States.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does your job help with that? I guess so. I mean, other people do way more than that, but then for you to travel twice or thrice.
You know, my job, I've been job switching every couple of years now.
Okay.
And unfortunately, government worldwide has definitely cut down on expenditures.
Yeah.
And since I have been in kind of that supply chain procurement side, you see that. And so, unfortunately, government doesn't really allow you to travel much at all. COVID made a change to that, right? With a lot of work from home, maybe allowing people to travel more locally, but it's definitely not an opportunity to travel. And even, unfortunately, the vacations and the benefits in Canada and with Canadian governments are not that great anymore. And salary, obviously, all around the world, government people are not paid as much as they used to be, and the cost of living has gone up everywhere, right? And even with Deloitte, I mean, there's that misconception. I was there for 2 years. There's this thought, of consultants traveling around the world. But unfortunately, the area that I was in was quite, did not travel. So, and I don't think that I regret that. I think I want to keep the travel separate from the work. I think, I've heard from others, and I think my parents sometimes, think, well, wouldn't it be nice to make travel your work, right? To work in a job where you travel and to know people that have done that. But I don't think so. I don't try to be comfortable. I mean, I know slow travel is a thing. I wish I could slow travel all the time, but you can't really. Everything is expensive. It's a balance between cost and speed and convenience.
Yeah.
But, I don't like the idea of getting on a plane, going to a place for, a weekend or something, or a couple of days for work and then coming back,
Yeah.
right?
I relate.
Yeah.
That's me.
Yeah, exactly.
Have your travel preferences, destinations evolved over the years?
Yeah, probably.
Mm.
Definitely. Yeah, actually. Like you think of, when you're younger and you're comfortable, maybe in a hostel or sleeping on a bed somewhere, right? Or maybe lugging a massive backpack. To now where it's, you're definitely looking for more comfort, right? Maybe some safety if you're traveling with family. Convenience, right? Yeah, I think it's just natural.
What have you learned from your experience how many countries have you covered so far, more or less?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I actually was thinking about, your question and some of the things that you'd ask and some of the people that are in this area and that talk. And one of the things that is a pet peeve of mine, and it comes maybe from my work, is I really don't like to put numbers to things because I find that a lot of people make travel a bit of a competition, right? And I'd be in a meeting at work, right, with government people, and there'd be people in the meeting that maybe couldn't afford a house, right? Maybe they're renting a place, right? They're starting in their career. They can't afford a house, right? They're renting. They're maybe have a family, and you get in there with an executive director or somebody, and they're talking about, oh yeah, I went to this fancy place, right? And then somebody else would say, oh yeah, I went there too, and then I also went to like Argentina or something. And then somebody would say, oh yeah, well I've been to, and it's just, and even in like getting to know people conversations, it turns into that, right? Yeah. So I mean, I don't know. Definitely fortunate to have been to a lot of different places. I will say the only place that I haven't been, continent, would probably be Africa.
Okay.
And that's definitely a place that I would like to go.
What would be your top 3?
Top 3 places I'd like to go to?
Yeah. Yeah, over there in Africa.
Over there. Honestly, I'm going to admit ignorance. I don't know the country well enough. We do have some friends that we met, and again, really the friends that you meet when traveling is amazing, right? I often think that a lot of the people that I've met and maintained friendships with, even though I may have only met them once in person, I have closer relationships with the people that I've known, and been with for a long time. They speak highly of, doing the safari thing, right? In like, I think Tanzania,
South Africa,
or somewhere,
Tanzania.
right? So, obviously that's there.
You're also
me,
close to
yeah,
North Africa.
exactly. I mean, obviously Morocco and those places are very popular, and I mean, but still great to see. Just because of history, I mean, I think Libya would be interesting.
Yeah.
And for me, something that I've always been fascinated by is Ethiopia, and the history of Christianity there.
The very
Is just
country
amazing.
which hasn't been colonized,
Exactly,
matter of fact. So it's
exactly.
very genuine.
Yeah.
You'll find a very original and well preserved culture over the years.
And going back to food, right? We were fortunate enough to have an Ethiopian community in Victoria, so I have had Ethiopian food and Ethiopian coffee, and the food is
They eat a
amazing.
lot of raw food. I don't know if
Yes.
you've had any of these,
Yeah.
but they do
Yeah.
eat raw foods, fish.
Yeah, which I just remember it as being good, and a lot of stews, and maybe not fancy, right? But like a lot of Filipino food is maybe not fancy, but it's good.
What have you learned from this vast traveling experience? And how has it shaped your perception of the world as what they refer to as a global village at the end of the day?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And I mean, that's something that we're trying to pass on to my son, and why we're traveling now, right? Is unfortunately, I feel that a lot of the world has become a lot more insular,
Mm-hmm.
which is counterintuitive to what's been happening. Even social media, right? It drives people's thoughts in certain directions to certain places. I mentioned, my upbringing in Canada, and when I grew up, we had different sports, we had different cultures. I had a teacher that taught me cricket, for crying out loud. Um, and a lot of people comment, well, being from Canada, and being who you are, you're not exposed to a lot of different cultures. And I say, no, I really was. There was neighbors from Persia, from Africa, from India, from all around when I grew up. And now I find that Canada and probably a lot of other cultures are becoming more monocultural, right? Like my son, when he was in Canada, the only sport was hockey, which made no sense because, we don't get ice in our part of Canada. And we're taught more about single cultures, more about Canada, less about the wars, less about other countries. And I see that in his curriculum, right? So ironically, I just felt that I was very fortunate to have the upbringing that I did. Not saying it was anything grand that made me understand everything. Africa as an example being a huge gap,
Yeah.
but still. So it's taught me to really value that, I think. Yeah, and try to pass that on to my son. It really has changed a lot, though. I mean, I was thinking, before coming on, I think I was actually in Hawaii when 9/11 happened. And I do remember passing through airport security. I remember seeing stuff on the screen. I know it was a very, an event that affected a couple of countries, but it really had a global effect, right? Especially on travel. And it's definitely changed a lot since then, right? Probably not for the better.
I think the thing about culture clashes, most of your memories will be in the first days because over time it becomes a normal thing. This is
Exactly.
something you should expect when you travel. But do you remember any particular culture clash that you faced while traveling and that has maybe contributed to changing your perception of many things, of people and why they do things in some ways?
Yeah, I think going back to what I said about just meeting people and talking to people, right? And trying to not make those assumptions about where you are or who they are or what they look like. Assumptions are obviously a good thing. They help you avoid a lot of difficult situations, but they can also be a challenge. I can't think of any great, amazing culture clash experience or breakthrough, right? I don't think that things really happen like that.
Maybe it's because
Yeah.
you were prepared to see difference.
Or just didn't know, right? I mean, definitely lots of places, and unfortunately, having a bit of a hearing disability, a borderline, languages are really a challenge for me. I mean, I grew up in a very English speaking country, you know, So not having exposure to that, unlike my wife, who I think has a bit of more of an ear for languages. So languages are definitely something that I think is a regret and leads to a lot of challenges. But you just have to recognize that.
So, how was your integration process here in Spain?
Yeah, it's ongoing, obviously, right? So,
How long have you been around?
probably a good couple of months now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
but not
I
a
thought
long
about
time.
years.
No. So yeah, still in its early stages. I think obviously that's the amazing thing about my son is seeing how he's adapting quicker, even though he maybe doesn't recognize it. But
Came to Spain straight from Canada, right?
Yeah, we traveled a little bit on the way, but pretty much. I think that's actually one of the reasons why we're doing this is just because as you get older and you look at people that are older than you and your peers, and your thinking tends to get more set, right? You tend to get more set in your ways.
Right.
So we've talked about this, how a lot of people move here and they're like, oh, we're moving here for the lifestyle or the weather or whatever. And I mean, that's great. But we're recognizing that it's a massive challenge. We might not work out. It more likely may work out, but partially, not as much as you think it will. It's also very hard on our son, but we want him to have that experience, and we really want to force ourselves to keep evolving, right, as we grow older, so that we don't become so set in our ways and our thinking.
Yeah. The Spanish lifestyle. I think coming to Spain is probably a very cost-effective decision, especially when you don't depend on the local labor markets. If you have a certain set of goals that you want to reach over a very limited period of time, coming here for 1, 2, 3 years would be a very good decision, I would say.
Yeah, it obviously is, and a lot of people make that decision, but it is obviously very unfortunate as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
The thing that I think that as we travel and recognize is that I don't think that there's a lot of countries where that's not the case, right? Obviously, for Canadians and Americans coming to Spain, that makes some sense. But for other people, like Americans, it makes sense for them to go to Canada, right? I mean, it's just this trickle-down effect throughout the world, right?
Right.
And I hear people about these fantastic salaries and doing these amazing things, but really, I think that everything is becoming more polarized, right?
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of honesty, unfortunately, with people and what they earn, because we try to maintain these facades of who we are and what we're doing and our identity. But I mean, things are really becoming more polarized, right? There's a subset of people in the world that are making a ton of money in every country, and then there's a lot of people whose incomes are just getting lower, right?
Well, that was a nice talk. I guess the last thing we want to hear is your next destination.
Yeah, obviously, we'd love to explore Spain more.
Mm-hmm.
When I go back to my experience in Turkey and how it wasn't really the best experience, as with anything, I want to give it a second chance, right? I want to go back to Turkey, especially with my family. I mean, it is an amazing country with a lot to offer and great food. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Philippines. Obviously, we'd like to get back there with family and friends. There's just too many places to visit, too many people to reconnect with, right? That we'd like to see. So there's the places you'd like to go that you've never been, and then there's the places that you want to go back to and see people